Welcome back to another episode from the Optimal Body Podcast. I'm Dr. Dom.
I'm Doc Jen.
And today we're going to talk about stretching, but more specifically, what's the difference between flexibility and mobility? All right, so when I say stretching or mobility, I'm sure something comes into mind. Like, yeah, I know what that is. Before we dice apart what exactly stretching is, what exactly mobility is, and where they might be different, I want you to comment below. What do you think? Do you stretch? What kind of stretching protocol do you use? Do you skip stretching? Do you not know why it's important? We're going to kind of dive into all that. But before we do that, please hit the notification bell and subscription button because we have so many of these videos, both our podcasts and videos that Jen comes out with on a week-to-week basis that help you with your body pains and restrictions. So make sure you get signed up for those before we dive in.
I want people to understand. I mean, typically when someone is telling me that they do mobility, they're showing me some passive stretches that they're doing. So I'm like, okay, so you're doing flexibility.
Yeah. Oh, I do this one, touch my toes, or I sit in this pigeon, or I do this or that. Yeah. And that is
it's
what
not
a lot
bad.
of people... No, it's not bad. And we don't want to say that flexibility or just passive stretching is bad. It's a huge component of mobility. And we see mobility as kind of this more overarching thing that includes a lot of other steps. Passive stretching, which is what a lot of people see as flexibility, is one step and a very important one at that.
Exactly. So we want to help you understand, okay, what's the difference between them? And when is it most appropriate for me to start to integrate it based on my body's needs?
So to kind of define the difference a little bit, we see mobility as the ability to actively control your joints through the full range of motion that you have, where flexibility is that passive ability to go into a range of motion. So an example that we will often talk about is for the hamstrings. If you're doing some sort of forward fold or folding towards your toes, you're passively going into that stretch because you're using the ground to press your legs up as you lean your body forward. That's a passive stretch versus if you lay on your back and try to keep your knee straight and lift your leg as far as you can go, that's more showing you what kind of active hamstring mobility you have because you're actively bringing that leg into that range of motion as far as you can.
Or even challenging it more and standing.
And doing it standing
and trying to lift
keeping
your
the leg
leg
straight and lifting it up. Where we think mobility is the end goal, where we should get to, is that's a lot more functional. If we have this range of motion, we want to be able to control our body through it.
Exactly. I mean, it's going to help if you're suddenly falling, if you're needing to run after something quickly, if you step out to the side. If you don't have that active ability to control that range of motion within a muscle or a joint, this is where oftentimes we'll see people quickly strain or pull muscles or get injured because we haven't prepared the body to handle load in these various quick ranges, right? So being able to understand how to work on that is something that could be really effective.
Yeah, but when I run on this trail with our dog, there's a lot of sections that are downhill and it's really gravelly and it's really loose. And often I will be, don't tell Jen, but I'll be running and my foot will hit a spot and slide. And if I didn't have active hamstring control, eccentric control, because my leg is sliding out, my hamstring is lengthening, and I'm needing to slow down and control my body. That's actually a position a lot of people hurt their hamstring in, have a hamstring strain, tear, but because it's something that I work on, that active, loaded, eccentric hamstring control, my body's a little bit more prepared where foot slides, no problem. I wait until my foot gathers its control. My hamstring does the work to basically control my whole body weight running downhill on a single limb. Again, it's where my physical therapy and biomechanics brain starts nerding out because those are the things you prepare yourself for in the gym. Yeah. Running downhill on loose gravel.
It sounds weird to say, but yeah, I mean, you're helping prepare your body for a life circumstance, and that's what we're really wanting to do.
That's what I train for. I don't train so I can do deadlifts in the gym. I train so I can feel safe and comfortable running on relatively risky trails with my dog.
What does mobility do? What does it help with? Some key points that, I think is really important. It helps to improve your joint range of motion. So not only, where flexibility is more so going to help to improve that overall ability for the muscle to move around a joint, where you're now being able to control that full range of motion within a joint. It improves your joint sense or proprioception as to where that limb is in space when we're moving or rotating about the joint, because now we're using control and strength around that joint, not just kind of throwing it wherever. It improves muscular balance around a joint to help prevent one muscle group from taking over during a movement, and it improves overall control and stability of the joint, which is especially important for those with hypermobile joints. And this is where, that comparison, especially of mobility versus flexibility, becomes really important.
People with hypermobility are very flexible.
Yes, they're already very flexible.
They don't often have good controlled mobility. And that's where when people say, oh, I don't need to do mobility, like, well, no, you don't need to do the passive stretching part. You have beautiful, incredible range of motion in most of your joints. Where we can work is the control. And here's where we'll go through kind of the 4 main steps of mobility, or what we think people should do to gain full controlled mobility in their joints. Step number 1, passive stretching, yes. Which is that flexibility that we've been talking about, and is really an important, especially for somebody who may have different tightnesses like me. I need to spend a lot of time in these passive stretches so that my body feels comfortable going into more range of motion. This is where you're talking to those Golgi tendon organs that are in our muscle tendons saying, hey, it's okay to let this muscle relax a little bit more. And that's why during passive stretching, we want to stay in these passive stretches for a long time. Especially research done in these areas say up to 2 minutes is a good minimum
right.
to sit in this stretch, because it's such a neurologically driven process that by the end of that 2 minutes, there's no way your Golgi tendons and your muscles will have been able to ignore, and they will definitely have allowed you to gain more range of motion.
So our nerves communicate back to our brain, which indicates, a new range of motion is safe. And so over time, the brain reduces the need to protect or restrict that range of motion. And so we can gain more range of motion. It decreases fascial muscle and some tendon stiffness immediately after the stretch. It adds tensile load into a muscle, similar to strength training. So there's actually some really cool studies on this. If you were to hold for 30 to 60 minutes for a stretch, you can actually see some similar tendon thickening, similar to strength training. Am I using stretching and passive mobility prior to a workout? Immediately prior to a workout, I probably don't want to just be like using a strap and stretching my hamstring and then going and deadlifting. That's going to reduce my power production and my force within my muscles.
Yeah, and knowing when to use each of these is always one of the most important parts of the question too.
Yes.
Where passive stretching might best be used at the end of a workout to help relax and down regulate, which is kind of similar to our warm-up cool-down plan, which there's a 1-week warm-up cool-down plan that we've added into the jen.health membership. It is a great way to get a better understanding of what an effective warm-up looks like, and then a great way to cool down and down regulate your system. You can basically do this whole plan for free. If you sign up for your free week trial right now, you can go through all of these exercises. They're specifically geared for an upper body lift or a lower body lift or a full body lift or cardio.
Yeah.
And there's multiple examples of each of the lifting ones. There's one that is meant for more cardio or aerobic activity. If you want to check that out, you can go down to the link in the show notes, get signed up for your free week trial. If you join now, there's still prizes for participation. So there's still prizes for getting in. So yeah, the next step is getting more into active mobility. So that's essentially what we were talking about before, where even if you're just laying on your back, it's actively bringing that leg up and doing the hamstring stretch without using anything to pull passively. There's tons of different examples of this where you can even do it like a lateral lunge, where you're putting load through your groin and then coming back up. Again, you're kind of using gravity in the ground to get into the stretch, but you're still needing to activate to get back out of it.
Yeah, I mean, essentially we're trying to say, okay, I just passively stretched into this range of motion. So maybe I did just use a strap to kind of down regulate my system. I used my breath to help find more range, tolerate more stretch within my muscle. And now I'm going to kick that strap off to the side and I'm going to just lift my leg actively a few times, or I'm going to stand and try to, or sit up and lift my leg actively. Now I'm going to turn on my hip flexors. I'm going to explore how that muscle can move with activating the other side. So now I'm activating my quad and my hip flexor to allow my hamstring to have more space, and I'm actively controlling that. Okay, I'm trying to make sure that I'm not overstretching a muscle now. I love yoga because maybe you're already a hypermobile person. It's so easy for you to go into these stretches and really, deepen into some of these poses. However, we could be pushing the limit of how much you're stretching and cause some overstretching.
If it's just passive, you may not be supporting in that range. And a good example is if you realize your active mobility is significantly less than your passive mobility. Then it might not be super healthy for you to hang out at the end of those passive stretches, because that's telling us something. If I can get into a passive hamstring stretch where I'm laying down on my legs, but I can't actively lift my hamstring, past 90 degrees if I'm laying on my back, that tells us that your hip might not be fully supported when you're in that end range stretch. And that's where some people start getting joint issues because they just hold those end range positions.
Yes, I want to use passive stretching and flexibility. Maybe it feels good in my body, but we need to add in an active.
Yeah. And then the next step, which is working on eccentric loading. I mentioned it earlier in my trail running example, but eccentric essentially means the lengthening portion. So
from a bicep curl.
Yeah, bicep curl is easy to understand.
I'm holding a weight, and as my arm is coming out, I'm still holding the weight. So I'm still activating that muscle, but now it's lengthening through that range.
Yeah, so strengthening as we're lengthening. And the reason that we want to focus on this first is, one, we're stronger. Our muscle can tend to take more load during the eccentric phase. And also, we tend to gain strength faster, or another way of saying that is we cause a little bit more micro damage to the muscle, which essentially then makes it heal to be stronger. So we tend to gain strength faster if we focus a little more on this eccentric phase of the movement. So with our hamstrings, that's like during a straight leg deadlift, when you're doing the hinge and folding forward, your hamstrings are lengthening, but you might have some weight. So you're strengthening while lengthening during that slow eccentric phase.
This is where we really gain that mobility.
You see it in all sorts of rehab protocols because it is one of the best ways to strengthen up areas that we may be rehabbing, that we may have injured previously, to increase their ability to take that load.
And then going on to the last area that we kind of look at mobility, which is active loaded mobility. So, I mean, it's going to kind of play a role in all of them besides passive mobility, but now I'm putting some weight on it. So, I mean, it's essentially strength training. This is now going to challenge my muscles and joints in not only improving how we move through a particular motion, but how to control it through that motion and how to control the external load beyond just my body weight. Right? And
that's where we start to train for those variable things that happen in life that we may not have expected.
Better carryover.
The quick step that you need to take to the side because you lost your footing on loose ground, or you slide on ice, but you're able to catch yourself and your quads can take that because of the strength training you've been doing. I mean, so many examples of this, from a regular squat to doing a lateral lunge, or like a Cossack squat for your groin, holding weight. Really, any loaded strength exercise is going to be taking certain muscle groups through the lengthening and shortening process.
We need all 4 steps. I don't think that, it's mobility versus flexibility. I think it's using them as needed for your body. Maybe if you're more hypermobile, you probably don't need more of the passive stretching unless you want to get out of some muscle guarding and a lot of protection that's happening within the body. There's still a place for it. It's just then how are we actively loading the body after using this better? If you want to do flexibility, say you're super stressed, you're super tense, you've been sitting all day long, you just want to feel like you're getting a little bit of a stretch and you're kind of relaxing in your body. You've been super stressed and tense all day. I would say it's okay. If you still want to use that before a workout, it is okay to do it for a little bit. But immediately following that, it is important to not just jump into your workout. If you're going to do passive stretching and just holding positions passively, then you need to add an active or eccentric component into your warm-up prior to your workout, because that's going to, reduce any of the negative side effects that would have happened from static stretching right into a workout. As long as you do an active component prior to your workout, you are fine.
Check out that warm-up cool-down plan. And if you're just more interested specifically in mobility, we have the Mobility Foundations course that basically takes you through all 4 of the steps we just outlined over 4 weeks, going through 5 different areas in the body that people specifically tend to be really restricted. If you want to check out the Mobility Foundations course, you can use code OPTIMAL20 to get an extra bonus discount for our podcast audience.
Ooh, that's a big discount.
Yeah, big discount. So check out Mobility Foundations. That's just jen.health/foundations. And of course, reach out if you have any other questions about any of the programs, or if you have any questions about mobility where you might want to be focused, reach out to us at jen@jen.health, jen@jen.health, and we will try to get answers back to your questions.
Thanks so much for joining us on another episode of the Optimal Body Podcast. I hope that you learned a little bit more about when specifically you're thinking for your own body, when do I need more flexibility? When do I need more mobility training? And again, if you want more specifics on how to be led through that, that's where Mobility Foundations will help you identify exactly the type of mobility that's needed in your body and when you should implement it. Or we have our warm-up and cool-down plan on Jen Health, where you can just pick and choose what you need for your typical workout that you love, and it's all provided for you. So linked up below. Just let us know if you have any questions.